Remember my WTF Screamo video that I made a year ago? The part where I mentioned the Sasscore genre even though that genre doesn't even exist? I said, Sass was kinda like the feminine side of hardcore since compared to actual hardcore bands that were pretty much macho and wears oversized clothing. Well, I never told you about the masculine side of hardcore called Beatdown Hardcore. So what is it? Beatdown Hardcore is a subgenre of hardcore punk with elements of heavy metal. It sometimes gets confused since these two genres exist. New York Hardcore and Metalcore combined. They also include other names for Beatdown Hardcore such as Heavy Hardcore, Brutal Hardcore, and Tough Guy. No, I did not make the last one up. How did Beatdown Hardcore begin? How did it become different from hardcore punk? And why is this genre controversial? Before we get the history of Beatdown Hardcore, let's look at how this genre sounds compared to other punk music genres. Beatdown Hardcore tends to have aggressive vocals, gang vocals, breakdowns, and heavy guitar riffs that sounds like you're in a fight club. Their lyrical content uses brotherhood, hometown, lifestyle, dress, and social issues, and they can't forget the vital part of being macho. It's often compared to New York Hardcore since they both had lyrics about brotherhood and social issues. Still, New York Hardcore tends to be more into political lyrics since the origin was similar to DC Hardcore and the whole youth crew dominate the punk genre. So let's now get on with the history. In the 80s, hardcore punk was the dominant genre in the punk scene with many bands such as Meyer Threat, Bad Brains, Agnostic Front, and Black Flag, revolutionizing the genre with fast pace and political message. Although most of the bands that I mentioned came from Washington DC, in New York there were tons of bands coming out of hardcore punk like, as already mentioned, Agnostic Front, Warzone, Youth of Today, and Gorilla Biscuit. But there was this one band that sounded different than those other bands, and it was Cro-Mags. Cro-Mags is a band that helped to fuse into hardcore punk and thrash metal, now known as crossover thrash. They released their debut album in 1986, The Age of Coral. The sound of the album was so much different than your average hardcore punk in the 80s that a few of the tracks of the album used a bit of slower riffs and gang vocals. But the one who made the sound of Beatdown Hardcore what it is today was the band Breakdown. Breakdown focused on the rhythm of the tracks when they released their demo album in 1987, and they were more influenced on the metallic sound, which you can hear more thrash metal influence. In 1988, Judge released their debut EP, New York Crew, and then in 1989, Killing Time released their debut album, Brightside, which helped make their hardcore sound as groove as possible. Last but not least, in 1989, Outburst released their debut EP, Miles to Go. This EP was another game changer with the riffs and drumming, which used a slower pace and got straight to the lyricism about brotherhood and life. At the time before it was called Beatdown, all of these albums that I mentioned were so-called tough guy music. Many bands were formed in the late 80s such as Biohazard, Bloodline, Coes Life, and Sheer Terror, and all four released their debut projects while beginning to make music. Things started to change slightly in the 90s when some bands became moderately successful. For example, the first hardcore band that made it big in the 90s was Biohazard, which was a hardcore band that combined hardcore, metal, and hip-hop. Biohazard was also an early example of rap metal before it was named nu metal later on. They released their first album in 1990, but their second album was Urban Disciple after they signed to Roadrunner Records, the biggest metal label to this day. Since their release, they played many MTV music videos and sold millions of copies. Their hit single, Punishment, was a success in that it was the most played song in Headbangers Brawl. 2 years later, they signed to Warner Bros. Records, which was more prominent label than Roadrunner. They had the same success as their Urban Disciple, selling their third album, State of the World Address, selling millions of copies also. However, after their fourth album, Mataleo, they left the label and returned underground. And who can I forget about Madball? At first they formed a band in the late 80s when Freddie Christian was 12 or 13 years old, since his older brother, Roger Mirad, was in Agnostic Front and let Freddie start a music career that young. They released their first two EPs when Freddie was in high school at that time. In 1994, they reached out to Roadrunner and signed them, which released their debut album, Set It Off. This album revolutionized the hardcore genre. It reached a large fan base and even went on world tours with famous acts like Black Sabbath and Slayer. It even had a music videos, which was rare to see hardcore bands doing music videos besides Biohazard. In 1996, Bulldoze released their only studio album, The Final Beatdown. This album pioneered the word beatdown, which later became a name of the genre that everyone knows called Beatdown Hardcore, and influenced many newer bands thanks to Bulldoze with slow-paced riff and fast rhythm strumming. In 1997, Hatebreed released their debut album, Satisfaction is the Devil's Desire. This album was a breakthrough and one of the most essential albums in the hardcore genre. It helped to break hardcore music into the mainstream and more prominent audience, even going bigger than Madball was. It was even the biggest selling debut record by any hardcore band. It was so successful for their first album that they signed with a major label, Universal Records. So in the early 2000s, Hatebreed led a massive role in movies. Their song, I Will Be Heard, was their second album, Perseverance, appeared on Triple X and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. 2003 I mean. Hatebreed also headlined tours with Slipknot, Avenged Sevenfold, and was nominated for the Grammy Awards in 2005. While the success of Hatebreed happened, many beatdown bands were still underground and many were still going strong without having a major label. Still, with the rise of metalcore popularity, many bands were more influenced by metal than hardcore, such as Killswitch Engage, Trivium, and Shadows Fall. On the other hand, beatdown hardcore influenced newer bands, with many bands pushing boundaries with different genres such as deathcore and black metal. Many bands involved in this genre were signed by two labels that helped shape beatdown hardcore, Victory and Trustkill Records. So it was getting more attention for the label since both were signing numerous popular bands. The whole scene was falling off at that point since metalcore was taking over in the hardcore and metal scene, and it stopped having much of the entire brutal tough guy metal since the scene fashion was taking over in metalcore. For example, Bring Me the Horizon, The Devil Wears Prada, and the one who changed metalcore of all, Attack Attack. In the 2010s, it was the same as in the 2000s, but the difference was that many beatdown hardcore bands were now at metal festivals with the same lineup as other metal bands. Many newer bands were formed during the 2010s, such as Farios, Never Ending Game, Kublai Khan, Mugshot, Karma, and most famously, Knocked Loose. Knocked Loose was the most famous in that genre, and their song Counting Worms became their most renowned song thanks to their breakdown and even numerous memes. I know Knocked Loose stopped doing beatdown hardcore after Laugh Tracks, but they're still heavy and got really popular. In 2019, Tsunami was formed and became the fastest growing band thanks to social media like YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. At first, they were a parody band making fun of hardcore stereotypes in music, but as soon as they went viral during lockdown, they were blowing up big time. Today, many beatdown hardcore bands remain underground, while some bands who blew up get to be in a bigger venue. Although many fans sometimes criticize for being commercialized, as Hatebreed, Knocked Loose, and Speed give you a lot of promotion with products and call them sellouts. Twist of the knife, end of your life, the light lets your eyes. Their concerts? Holy shit. If you're not the type of concert goers that don't like mosh pit or slam dance, I mean, why are you even here in the first place? Then this concert is not for you. These concerts are very dangerous and you must be careful with the crowd killers. What is it? They're an audience that attacks someone who does not mosh. And even if you do mosh, they will still hit you. So you're not safe in both ways. Their fashion? I will put up these two pictures to describe fashion in that genre. Can you guess what the similarities are between both of these pictures? They love baggy clothes and dress like they're in the mid-2000s rap music video. I understand that half of the bands grew up in a rough neighborhood, so that's why their music and fashion are so aggressive. The controversy surrounding beatdown hardcore is that it is often categorized as an ignorant genre since its lyrics are pretty awful. They usually use lyrics containing homophobia and violent threats. Many beatdown bands get hated for being repetitive and not knowing how to play an instrument well. The album cover for this genre have the band members standing or looking at you like you got knocked out, guns, war, riots, and badass skeletons. Oh, and don't forget about adding black and white filters all the time. Despite having mixed reception of that genre, we can all agree that it's great to listen to when you work out. The best albums I will recommend to listen for starters are Born to Land Hard by Coes Life, Rise of the Underdog by No Retreat, Not Through Blood by Pain of Truth, 1134 by Irate, Just Another Day by Never Ending Game, Broken Ties, Spoken Lies by Shattered Realm, Haymaker by Throwdown, Revenge for Society by Blood for Blood, and California by First Blood. Thank you so much for watching my video. Consider to like and subscribe for more videos to come. I'll see you next time.